The night I saved my cafe began with me unlocking the door for 16 men I should have been afraid to let inside. At 11:52 on a Thursday night, I did not know that yet. I only knew Miller's Corner Cafe had made $218 that day. My son was asleep in the back room, and a white envelope beside the register said I had 10 days to prove I could meet the financial terms required to keep my lease. 10 days. I had circled the date twice in red ink, as if making it uglier might somehow make it less real. Rain struck the front windows hard enough to drown out the old refrigerator humming behind me. The cafe smelled like coffee, cinnamon, and the chicken soup I had sold at lunch. 12 tables sat empty beneath warm pendant lights. My mother's photograph hung beside the register, exactly where it had been since I took over the place 5 years earlier. "We are still here," I whispered to her. I was not sure whether it was a promise or a question. I counted the register again. Same number. Of course it was. I switched off the open sign and checked on Noah. He was curled beneath a blue blanket on the small couch in the employee room, one sneaker still on his foot and a science book open beside him. 9 years old, and already too familiar with falling asleep at mom's work. I removed his sneaker, kissed his forehead, and returned to the dining room. That was when headlights washed across the windows. I froze. One black SUV rolled to the curb. Another stopped behind it. Then another. Their hazard lights blinked through the rain. Doors opened. Men stepped onto the sidewalk in dark coats, shielding their faces from the weather. I counted without meaning to. 5, 9, 12, 15. They gathered beneath the awning and beside the vehicles, but nobody approached my door. Then the rear door of the first SUV opened. One final man stepped out. Tall, dark hair, charcoal overcoat, no umbrella. He looked toward one of the vehicles while another man spoke to him, then toward the flooded intersection beyond my cafe. Finally, he looked at me. There was something unsettling about how still he was while everyone around him moved. I reached for the deadbolt. Too late. 2 measured knocks touched the glass. The man stood outside alone. The other 15 waited behind him. I pointed toward the dark open sign. Closed. I called through the door. He glanced at the rain. I can see that. His voice was calm. Then we understand each other. Our vehicles cannot safely continue. The road ahead is flooded, and replacement transportation is delayed. There are 16 of you. Yes. I have 12 tables. His mouth moved slightly, almost a smile. We can share. Thunder rolled overhead. From the back room came a sleepy voice. Mom. Every instinct in me changed direction. I turned toward Noah, then looked back through the glass. The stranger had heard him too. He immediately stepped farther from the door, giving me space instead of asking again. That mattered. I still cannot explain why, but it mattered. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door 6 inches. Cold rain blew across my shoes. 2 rules, I said. Nobody smokes inside, and nobody gets loud. My son is sleeping. The stranger nodded once. Understood. I opened the door wider. He entered first, wiped his shoes on the mat, then turned toward the men outside. He did not raise his voice. Keep it quiet. 15 men immediately lowered their voices and entered with the careful obedience of people accustomed to following him. I stood behind the counter watching them spread through my little cafe, suddenly aware that I had made a decision I could not easily reverse. The stranger removed his wet overcoat and met my eyes. Thank you. Do not make me regret it. I will try not to. I did not know his name. I did not know why 15 men waited for him before they moved. I only knew that the most powerful person in the room had spoken softly, and everyone else had listened. The men filled Miller's Corner Cafe without ever making it feel crowded. That was the strange part. 15 of them took seats across the 12 tables, but every movement seemed measured. 2 chose the booth nearest the front windows. 3 sat where they could see the entrance. The others removed their wet coats, placed their phones beside untouched coffee cups, and waited. The dark-haired stranger remained standing until everyone was inside. Then he chose the small table closest to the counter. Only after he sat did the others settle completely. I noticed. Of course I noticed. Coffee? I asked. If it is not too much trouble. You are already 16 people after midnight. We passed trouble 10 minutes ago. His mouth almost curved into a smile. I started a fresh pot. While it brewed, one of the men approached the counter. Do you take cash? I take anything that clears. He reached for his wallet, but the stranger spoke from behind him. I have it. The man immediately stepped aside. I looked at the stranger. You pay for everyone? Tonight. That sounds expensive. I have survived worse. I poured 16 cups and carried them out 2 at a time. When I placed his coffee down, he handed me a $100 bill. Coffee is $3. Keep the rest. I pushed the bill back across the table. No, his eyes lifted to mine. No. $3 for coffee. I am not charging $97 because the weather is bad. Consider it compensation for staying open. Consider this a cafe, not an emergency shelter with luxury pricing. For the first time, he smiled. Barely. You negotiate strangely. You tip strangely. Before he could answer, thunder shook the windows. A door opened behind the counter. Noah appeared wearing plaid pajama pants, one sock, and the worried expression he tried to hide whenever storms woke him. Mom. I crossed the room immediately. I am here, sweetheart. He stopped when he saw the strangers. His hand found mine. Why are there so many men? Their cars cannot get through the flooded road. Noah looked toward the windows. All of them. Someone at the far table quietly laughed. Another man whispered something. Noah squeezed my fingers tighter. The stranger noticed. He stood. He did not approach us. He did not raise his voice. Lower your voices. That was all. 15 conversations disappeared into soft murmurs. Phones were silenced. Chairs stopped scraping. Even the man near the coffee station set his cup down more carefully. Noah looked up at me, then at the stranger. Are you their teacher? I closed my eyes for 1 second. Noah. The stranger looked almost surprised. No, their dad. Definitely not. A few men smiled. Noah studied him. Then why do they listen to you? Silence returned, but this time it felt different. The stranger glanced around the cafe before answering. Because it is my job to make sure everyone gets home safely. Noah seemed satisfied with that. My mom does that too. The stranger looked at me. Something unreadable passed through his expression. I believe you. I guided Noah back toward the employee room. Try to sleep. Are they staying? Until their ride comes. He looked over my shoulder once more. They are really quiet. Yes. That one is scary quiet. I nearly laughed. Go to bed. When I returned, the stranger had moved from the table near the counter to one farther from the employee room. Several men had quietly rearranged themselves with him. He had created more distance from Noah without being asked. I poured myself half a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter. Thank you. For what? You know what? He nodded. A younger man approached him with a phone. Road crews are still working on the intersection. Replacement vehicles are at least 2 hours out. Then we wait, the stranger said. The younger man returned to his seat. I glanced at the clock. 12:26. Then I noticed one of the men staring at the empty pastry case. Another rubbed his stomach before quickly dropping his hand. A third took a long drink of coffee like he was trying to convince himself it counted as dinner. I looked at the stranger. When did you all last eat? He hesitated just long enough to answer the question without words. I turned toward the kitchen. Tomorrow's chicken, vegetables, bread, and soup stock were waiting in the refrigerator. Every ingredient had already been counted against money I did not have. Do not, the stranger said quietly. I looked back. Do not what? Spend food you need on us. I stared at him for a second, then reached for my apron. You worry about getting your people home. I pushed open the kitchen door. I will worry about whether they get there hungry. The refrigerator light made everything look more valuable than it was. 2 trays of chicken, a container of chopped celery, carrots, onions, potatoes, half a loaf of sourdough, and 3 quarts of stock I had made that afternoon. Tomorrow's lunch special was sitting on those shelves, already counted in my head as money for the electric bill. I reached for the chicken anyway. You really do not have to do this, the stranger said from the kitchen doorway. And you really do not have to supervise. I am not supervising. You are standing in my kitchen watching me cut onions. Fair point. I glanced at him. Without the wet overcoat, his dark suit looked even more expensive beneath the fluorescent lights. A silver watch showed beneath his cuff when he folded his arms. I looked back at my scratched cutting board. His watch probably cost more than everything in this room. How many bowls can you make? He asked. 16. 17. I already ate. That was not exactly true. Dinner had been half of Noah's grilled cheese after he said he was full, but the stranger did not need to know that. What is your name? He asked. Hannah. Dominic. Just Dominic? For now. I raised an eyebrow. Mysterious. Careful. Was that a warning? Advice. I charge extra for advice. That faint smile returned. 40 minutes later, the cafe smelled like chicken, thyme, warm bread, and the kind of comfort I had not planned to give away. I carried out bowls while Dominic's men quietly made room. One of them, a younger man named Luke, took a bite and closed his eyes. "Ma'am, this is incredible. Call me ma'am again, and you are washing dishes." He smiled. "Yes, Hannah." By the time I placed the last bowl in front of Dominic, everyone else had already started eating. He looked around before lifting his spoon. "You waited," I said. "They were hungry. So were you." His eyes met mine, but he did not answer. I returned to the counter and started calculating what I had just used. Maybe $60 in ingredients. Maybe more. I could stretch tomorrow's menu. Make extra biscuits. Push breakfast sandwiches. Pretend numbers could be persuaded if I worked hard enough. Dominic approached and placed several bills beside the register. I looked down. "No, it is for dinner. Dinner is $12 each. Keep the rest." "No, Hannah." "Dominic." He stared at me. "You always this difficult?" "Only with customers trying to turn soup into charity." I counted out the exact amount and pushed everything else back. As I did, my elbow caught the white envelope beside the register. It fell to the floor. Dominic bent down before I could reach it. He saw the bold red words across the front. Lease compliance notice. 10 days remaining. His expression changed. He handed it to me without opening it. 10 days. Forget you saw that. You are about to lose your lease? I said forget it. His gaze moved toward the kitchen. And you just used tomorrow's food to feed us. Heat rose into my face. Do not make this into something it is not. What is it? Dinner. You cannot afford dinner for 16 strangers. Probably not. Then why? I looked toward the employee room. Through the cracked door, I could see Noah's blue blanket and one small hand hanging over the edge of the couch. Because he watches me. Dominic followed my gaze. Your son. Every day? He watches how I talk to people when I am tired. How I treat customers when I am scared. How I behave when money is tight. I folded the notice and placed it beneath the register. I can lose a lease and rebuild somewhere else. What I cannot afford is teaching my son that kindness only matters when it is convenient. Dominic said nothing. I wiped the counter even though it was already clean. I cannot afford to become someone my son would be ashamed of either. The room behind him had gone quiet again, but this time he had not ordered it. Something in his face shifted, as if those words had reached a place money usually protected. Then 3 firm knocks sounded against the front glass. I looked toward the door. A man in a camel-colored raincoat stood beneath the awning holding a leather folder. My stomach tightened instantly. Dominic noticed. Who was that? I set the towel down. The reason those 10 days might not matter. Richard Caldwell did not look like a man who had driven through flooded streets by accident. His camel-colored raincoat was nearly dry, his silver sedan idled at the curb, and the leather folder under his arm looked more important to him than the storm. I unlocked the door but stayed between him and the cafe. It is after 1 in the morning, Richard. I saw the lights. His eyes moved past me toward the 16 men seated inside. Apparently you found customers. They are stranded. That does not change our situation. He lifted the folder. I brought the early termination agreement. My stomach tightened. You brought paperwork to my cafe after midnight. I was meeting with the redevelopment group nearby. In this weather? Business does not stop because it rains. Behind me, a chair shifted softly. I knew Dominic was listening. I also knew he had not moved closer. Richard opened the folder. My offer expires tomorrow at 5. Sign voluntarily, surrender the lease, and I will forgive the overdue balance plus give you a relocation payment. The compliance notice gives me 10 days. The notice gives you 10 days to satisfy the lease requirements. My buyout offer is separate. It expires tomorrow. There it was. 2 clocks ticking at once. One gave me 10 days to prove I could stay. The other gave me less than 16 hours to accept money for leaving. I am not signing tonight. Richard sighed. Hannah, be practical. I am being practical. You have a child. Every muscle in my shoulders tightened. Do not use Noah as leverage. I am saying stability matters. Then say that without bringing my son into it. Richard looked past me again. Who are these people? Customers. At 1 in the morning? Very patient customers. His attention stopped somewhere over my shoulder. I turned slightly. Dominic stood beside his table, one hand resting on the back of the chair. He said nothing. Richard studied him for several seconds, as though trying to place his face, then looked back at me. Tomorrow, 5 o'clock. I heard you. He closed the folder. After that, the relocation payment is gone. Then I will make my decision without it. Richard shook his head and stepped into the rain. I locked the door behind him and kept my hand on the deadbolt until his sedan disappeared. Only then did I realize my fingers were trembling. I hated that Dominic noticed. 10 days and tomorrow at 5, he said. Different deadlines. I turned around. You were listening. It is a small cafe. You could have pretended. I am not very good at pretending not to notice things. I believe that. I gathered empty bowls because doing something with my hands felt easier than standing still. Dominic remained where he was. Why does Caldwell want you out? Redevelopment. Apartments upstairs, expensive stores downstairs, cleaner sidewalks, higher rents, and apparently fewer places where people can buy pancakes for $8. How long have you been here? My mother opened Miller's Corner 25 years ago. I took over after she died. His eyes moved toward her photograph. And you want to keep it? Very much. Then why did you not ask me to help? I laughed once, mostly from exhaustion. Because I met you 3 hours ago. You still fed us. That was soup. Food you needed. Helping someone does not mean handing them responsibility for my life. Dominic considered that. You really do not know who I am. I set a bowl on the counter. I know your first name is Dominic. I know 15 men wait for you before they sit down. I know you own a suit that should never be this close to chicken soup. That is about it. Something changed in his expression. Maybe that is why you treated me normally. Should I not? He looked toward the rain-darkened window. Most people change when they hear my last name. Before I could ask what that meant, Luke approached with his phone. Replacement vehicles are 20 minutes out. Dominic nodded. Luke walked away. I looked back at him. So what is your last name? Dominic held my gaze for a quiet second, then reached for his overcoat. If you still want to know in 20 minutes, Hannah, I will tell you before I leave. The next 20 minutes told me more about Dominic than the previous 3 hours had. His men cleared every bowl from the tables without being asked. Luke carried a stack into the kitchen. Another man wiped down the booth where someone had spilled coffee. Nobody complained about the storm, the delay, or the fact that 16 people were waiting inside a cafe barely large enough for half of them. Dominic stayed near the window, checking his phone occasionally, but mostly watching the street. I tried not to watch him. I failed. You promised me a last name, I said while drying a bowl. I said I would tell you before I left. You have 17 minutes. You are counting. I have a 9-year-old asleep in the back and 16 strangers in my dining room. I am counting everything. His expression softened slightly. Fair enough. Headlights appeared through the rain 13 minutes later. 3 black SUVs stopped at the curb. 2 men hurried beneath the awning, and one entered as soon as I unlocked the door. His eyes went directly to Dominic. Mr. Russo, the west route is clear. We can leave whenever you are ready. Russo. The name hit my memory before Dominic could say another word. I had heard it on local television, seen it in headlines beside downtown restaurants, construction companies, private security firms, and old family businesses nobody seemed eager to discuss in detail. Some reports called the Russos influential businessmen. Other people used a shorter word when cameras were not around. Mafia. I looked at Dominic. He saw the recognition immediately. There, he said quietly. Now you know. Dominic Russo. Yes. That Dominic Russo? There are probably several. Do 15 men follow the others around too? Luke suddenly became fascinated by the floor. Dominic almost smiled. Probably not. My eyes moved toward the employee room. Dominic noticed that too. Nothing about tonight has changed, Hannah. Everything about tonight just changed. Only what you know about me. That is usually the part that changes things. He accepted that without argument. Then he reached into his coat and placed several bills on the counter. I looked down. Absolutely not. For the food. You paid for the food. Not enough. 16 dinners at $12 each. You paid exactly enough. You used ingredients you needed for tomorrow. That was my decision. Then let me replace them. No, Dominic studied me as if the word were unfamiliar when directed at him. Everyone wants something, he said. That sounds like a difficult way to live. You do not. I want plenty of things. Name one. I thought about Richard Caldwell's folder. 10 days. Tomorrow at 5. The refrigerator that made a new noise every Tuesday. No one needing new sneakers before winter. I could have named 50 things. Instead, I looked at the man standing across from me. Come back. Dominic's eyebrows lifted. Come back. when it is not raining, when your vehicles work, when you do not need shelter, soup, or anything else from me. Walk through that door like a normal customer and buy a cup of coffee. For the first time that night, he looked genuinely caught off guard. That is what you want. Yes. How much? $4. It was 3 earlier. I discovered you can afford the premium. Luke coughed into his hand to hide a laugh. Dominic looked at him, then back at me. $4. No giant tip. You negotiate aggressively for someone charging $4. My cafe. My rules. He put the extra money back into his coat. One by one, the men thanked me before stepping into the ring. Luke promised he would come back for soup. Dominic was last. At the door, he glanced toward my mother's photograph, then toward the room where Noah slept. Do not sign Caldwell's agreement without having someone review it. I folded my arms. That sounds suspiciously like help. Advice. I charge for advice. Put it on my coffee bill. Then he left. I watched the SUVs disappear and told myself men like Dominic Russo did not return to small cafes because someone asked them to buy coffee. At 8:14 the next morning, Noah and I turned onto the block and found a line stretching from Miller's Corner Cafe to the next intersection. Families, office workers, construction crews, nurses and scrubs. Noah stared through the windshield. Mom, why are all those people here? I could not answer. Then I saw several familiar black SUVs parked farther down the street. At the very end of the line stood Dominic Russo, alone, holding $4 in his hand. For a moment, I thought the line had to belong to another business. Then I saw Luke near the front holding 2 paper cups from the convenience store down the block, and I realized every person on that sidewalk was waiting for me to unlock Miller's Corner Cafe. Mom, Noah whispered, did we win something? I have absolutely no idea. I parked behind the cafe and walked around front with Noah beside me. People smiled when they saw us. A woman in blue scrubs called, "Are you Hannah?" Before I could answer, Luke stepped forward. My sister, he explained, pointing toward her. I told her about last night. Another man from Dominic's group raised his hand. I told my construction crew. A third nodded toward 2 older couples. My parents and their neighbors. I looked down the line. You all did this. Luke shrugged. You fed 16 people after midnight, when you could barely afford the ingredients. People thought that was worth supporting. My throat tightened. Then I saw Dominic at the end of the line. He did not move forward. He did not expect special treatment. He simply lifted the $4 between his fingers. You said come back. I did. I came back. Noah looked at me. Can we open before everybody freezes? Excellent management advice. I unlocked the door. The next 4 hours disappeared into coffee, eggs, pancakes, toast, breakfast sandwiches, and more orders than I had handled in months. My part-time waitress, Melissa, arrived after I called her in a panic. By 9:30, every table was occupied. By 10, we had run out of blueberry muffins. At 10:20, someone asked whether I catered office lunches. At 10:45, a construction supervisor wanted breakfast for 30 employees the following week. Nobody overpaid. Nobody left ridiculous tips. They simply bought food. Normal food at normal prices. That mattered more than I could explain. Dominic waited nearly 40 minutes before reaching the counter. I poured him black coffee. $4. He placed $4 beside the register. No premium for waiting? Waiting builds character. I was afraid you would say that. I handed him the cup. Did you arrange all of this? No, Dominic. I told 15 men where we spent the night. They told people they knew. That is all. Luke called from a booth. He also told us not to exaggerate the story. Dominic looked mildly annoyed. Thank you, Luke. I smiled. So this was word of mouth. Apparently your soup has influence. By noon, I had made more than I normally made in several slow days. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I caught myself looking at the calendar near the register. 9 days remained on the compliance notice. One extraordinary morning was not a business plan. Dominic noticed where I was looking. Of course he did. He approached the counter after the rush and placed a slim folder beside my coffee pot. What is this? An option. I opened it. The first page carried Richard Caldwell's building address. Beneath it were the words draft, offer, TO, purchase. I closed the folder immediately. No, Dominic blinked. You have not read it. You want to buy the building from Richard? I can make an offer. If he accepts, your lease problem disappears. And you become my landlord. I would give you favorable terms. That is not the point. His expression tightened with genuine confusion. Hannah, you have 9 days. I know exactly how many days I have. Then let me remove the problem. I pushed the folder back toward him. Last night I gave you shelter because you needed somewhere dry. I did not buy your car so you would never get stranded again. For the first time, Dominic had no immediate answer. That is different, is it? I am trying to protect what matters to you. By owning the ground underneath it. He looked at the folder, then at me. Around us, the cafe was still alive with conversation and clinking dishes. Noah sat at the counter drawing on the back of an old menu. I lowered my voice. You asked what I wanted. I asked you to come back and buy coffee. You did that. It mattered. But it does not solve the lease. Maybe not. Then tell me what does. I looked at the man who seemed accustomed to solving problems by making them disappear. You really want to help? Yes. I pushed the folder completely back to his side of the counter. Then the first thing you have to learn is that helping me and taking control are not the same thing. Dominic looked at the folder between us for several seconds, then closed it and slid it back beneath his arm. All right, he said. I blinked. That is it. You said no. People usually argue with me longer. People usually say no to me less often. I could not tell whether he was joking. Then this is probably healthy for you. The corner of his mouth moved. Apparently. I wiped the counter while the lunch crowd slowly thinned. You asked how to help. I did. I need customers who come back after the interesting story wears off. I need catering orders. I need enough time to satisfy the lease requirements. And I need someone who understands contracts better than I do. Dominic nodded. Those things are possible. Without buying anything I love. You are going to make me repeat that, are you not? Probably several times. Noah sat 3 stools away, drawing a rocket ship on the back of an old menu. Dominic glanced toward him, then lowered his voice. Why does keeping this place yourself matter so much? I stopped wiping. Because my mother spent 25 years building it. Because Noah thinks the corner booth belongs to him. Because every time life got difficult, this cafe was the one thing that still felt like home. I looked directly at Dominic. If every problem disappears because you own the answer, eventually you own my life too. His expression changed. I would never ask for that. You would not have to. Dependence can happen quietly. For once, he had nothing ready to say. I continued. You have enough money to remove obstacles. I understand why that feels like helping. But I do not need someone to carry me across the finish line. Give me a door. Let me be the one who walks through it. Dominic looked toward my mother's photograph. A door. Business opportunities. Introductions. Information. Things I can earn once I get there. And if one of my companies needs catering, they pay the same price as everyone else. No discounts. Now you are learning. He almost smiled. What about an attorney? Recommendation only. I hire them. I pay them. They represent me. Understood. I studied him suspiciously. That was surprisingly painless. Do not get used to it. The bell above the entrance rang before I could answer. Richard Caldwell walked inside. His eyes moved across the cafe, taking in the occupied tables and nearly empty pastry case before settling on Dominic. Recognition arrived slowly, then all at once. Mr. Russo, Richard said. Dominic gave a small nod. Nothing more. Richard looked at me. Hannah, my offer expires at 5. I checked the clock. 2:23. I know. He placed the leather folder on the counter. This is your last opportunity to leave with the relocation payment. Then I am declining it. His eyebrows rose. You should think carefully. I have. One busy morning does not satisfy your lease. No, but I still have 9 days under the compliance notice. And what exactly do you expect to accomplish in 9 days? Fear tightened my stomach, but I kept my voice steady. Enough to show you I can meet the requirements, and enough to negotiate terms that give this business a fair chance. Richard glanced toward Dominic. Is that what he told you to say? I felt something cold move through me. Before I could answer, Dominic stepped backward. One deliberate step. Away from the counter. Away from the conversation. He folded his hands in front of him and said nothing. I understood immediately. This one is yours. I looked back at Richard. No, he did not tell me anything. Then what changed since last night? I glanced around the cafe. At Noah coloring beneath my mother's photograph. At dirty plates waiting to be washed. At customers finishing coffee they had paid normal prices for. I remembered that being scared and being powerless are not the same thing. Richard studied me. What do you want? A written payment plan. Current obligations on time. plus an agreed amount toward what I owe. No surprise fees. No pressure to terminate while I meet the terms. And any new agreement gets reviewed by my attorney before I sign. You have an attorney? I will. Richard looked toward Dominic again. Dominic remained silent. Finally, Richard picked up his folder. Send me a proposal by Monday. My heart jumped, but I refused to show it. I will. He left without another word. I waited until the door closed before breathing out. Dominic approached the counter again. You stepped back, I said. You asked for a door. And his eyes met mine. I thought you should be the one standing in it. By Monday morning, I had learned that opportunity could be just as exhausting as disaster. My phone started ringing before 7. A downtown accounting firm wanted 30 boxed lunches for Wednesday. A construction company needed breakfast for 40 employees on Friday. A medical office asked whether Miller's Corner Cafe could provide coffee and pastries twice a month. Every caller wanted my regular prices. Every caller wanted an invoice. Nobody mentioned Dominic. That was exactly how I wanted it. By noon, Melissa had covered the refrigerator with order slips, and I had rewritten our catering menu 3 times because Noah informed me my handwriting looked like a tired doctor. That is rude, I told him. Is it wrong? Go finish your homework. Dominic arrived at 12:20 carrying nothing except his phone and the expression of a man trying very hard not to interfere. He waited until I finished an order before approaching the counter. Busy. I have forgotten what my feet feel like. Good problem. Ask me after Friday. I placed a coffee in front of him. $4. He paid exactly $4. Progress. The accounting firm is one of ours, he said. The construction company is not. They heard about you from Luke's brother. And the medical office? No idea. I stared at him suspiciously. I am learning to open doors, Hannah, not drag you through them. I hated how much I appreciated that sentence. That afternoon, I called the attorney he had recommended. Her name was Rebecca Hayes, and before discussing anything else, I asked the question that mattered. Who pays you? You do, she said. Who is your client? You are. Does Dominic Russo control what advice you give me? Rebecca laughed softly. No. Mr. Russo gave you my office number. That is the full extent of his involvement. Good. By Tuesday evening, Rebecca had reviewed my lease, the compliance notice, and Caldwell's proposed termination agreement. She found fees I could challenge, deadlines that needed clarification, and language that gave me more negotiating room than I realized. We built a payment proposal based on actual cafe revenue, not hope. Current obligations on time. A fixed weekly amount toward the overdue balance. No surprise penalties while I remained compliant. A 12-month extension if I completed the plan. I sent it to Richard before his deadline. He replied Wednesday morning with 3 words. We need revisions. Rebecca smiled when I read them aloud. That means he did not say no. For the next week, my life became coffee, invoices, catering trays, legal emails, and sleep whenever Noah allowed it. Dominic came in twice. Both times he sat at the corner table. Both times he asked nothing about the negotiations until I brought them up. On the 9th day, Richard walked into the cafe at 3:15 carrying the revised agreement. Rebecca was already seated beside me. Dominic happened to be at his usual table near the window. Richard noticed him immediately. I assume Mr. Russo has reviewed this. No, I said. My attorney has. Rebecca opened her copy. We went through every page, every fee, every deadline, every condition. Richard pushed back twice. I pushed back 3 times. My hands were cold beneath the table, but my voice stayed steady. Finally, he turned to the signature page. If you meet these terms, the lease extends 12 months. And there is no forced termination while I remain current under the agreement. Correct. No additional redevelopment fee. Correct. I looked at Rebecca. She nodded. I signed. Richard signed after me. When he left, I stared at the paper until the words blurred. I had not saved the cafe forever. I had earned 12 months and a fair path forward. That was enough to make my chest ache. Dominic approached only after Rebecca packed her briefcase. Congratulations, he said. You did not say one word. You had an attorney. You did not even glare at Richard. That required effort. I laughed. Then I looked at the signed agreement in my hands. You could have bought the building. You told me not to. You could have made this easier. Dominic's eyes moved toward my mother's photograph, then back to me. Easier was not what you asked for. Noah came running from the back room and wrapped his arms around my waist. Did we keep the cafe? I looked down at him. We earn more time. How much? 12 months. He grinned like I had said forever. Over his head, I looked at Dominic. He had enough power to change the ownership of the building, but instead he had changed something in himself. He had learned to stand close enough to help and far enough away to let the victory remain mine. 3 months later, Miller's Corner Cafe still looked like Miller's Corner Cafe. The blue booths were still faded at the edges. The bell above the front door still rang half a second too late. My mother's photograph still watched over the register, and the old refrigerator still made a sound every Tuesday morning that convinced me it was preparing to retire. But now there was a catering calendar beside the kitchen door. Melissa worked 5 days a week, and most mornings I unlocked the cafe to find customers already waiting outside. I had made every payment under the new agreement on time. Not easily, not magically. I had worked for every dollar, every order, every second chance. No one noticed the difference before I did. "You do not stare at the mailbox anymore," he said one morning. I never stared at the mailbox. He gave me the look 9-year-olds reserve for mothers who are obviously lying. You used to look at it like it owed you money. Technically, I was afraid it wanted money. He laughed and returned to his homework. The bell rang at 8:10. I did not need to look up. Dominic came every Monday at 8:10. Alone. No line of black SUVs. No 15 men waiting for him to choose a chair. He walked in, waited behind whoever was already ordering, and took the corner table near the window. The first time he did it, half the cafe stared. By the 6th week, Mrs. Parker from the flower shop asked him to move his coat because she needed the extra chair. He apologized and moved it. I enjoyed that more than I should have. I carried over his coffee. $4. Still 4. Do not sound disappointed. I expected inflation. Keep complaining, and I will introduce it. He placed $4 on the table. Exactly 4. You have trained me well. That sentence makes me uncomfortable. He smiled into his coffee. Something had changed between us, but neither of us rushed to name it. Maybe that was why it felt real. He never asked to own a piece of the cafe. I never asked him to solve my next problem. When one of his companies needed lunch for 60 people, they ordered from me because my food was good. When I needed a new commercial mixer, I bought one with cafe money. When no one needed winter boots, I bought those too, without checking my bank balance 3 times first. In December, the first heavy snow arrived before Christmas. I decided to open for 2 hours Christmas morning for anyone who had nowhere else to eat. Melissa volunteered immediately. Noah demanded responsibility for cookies. At 7:30 that morning, I heard vehicles outside. I looked through the window and laughed. Dominic stood on the sidewalk with Luke and 14 familiar men. This time they were not stranded. Some had brought wives, husbands, parents, and children. They carried trays of food, folding chairs, wrapped toys, and boxes of winter coats collected through their workplaces. Dominic entered last. "You brought an army." "Volunteers." "That is a generous interpretation." Luke walked past us carrying a box. "She means you are bossy." Dominic looked at him. "I heard that. Merry Christmas." By 9, every table was full. Coffee steamed against cold windows. Children decorated cookies with Noah. People who had never met shared breakfast like old neighbors. I stood beneath my mother's photograph and remembered another night when 16 men had filled these same tables while rain covered the windows. Dominic came to stand beside the counter. Not in front of me. Beside me. "Still stranded?" I asked. He looked around the cafe, then at me. "Not anymore." I understood what he meant, and I think he understood why I smiled. Months earlier, I had believed survival meant holding on so tightly that nobody could help me. Dominic had believed protection meant having enough power to remove every obstacle. We had both been wrong. I gave 16 strangers shelter without knowing who they were. In return, one powerful man learned that helping me did not require owning the answer. He could have bought the building beneath my feet. He could have paid every bill on my counter. Instead, he gave me something harder to give and more valuable to receive. An open door, a fair chance, and enough respect to let me walk through it myself.